welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
Great. Yeah, I'm actually doing all right. Just finished my...
Great or all right?
No, I'm doing great, actually.
Okay,
yeah.
Good.
I mean, didn't have the best training session, but that doesn't really matter. I know what I need to do from that training session.
So can I just pause you there?
Yeah.
Why didn't you have a good training session?
Just trying to practice some of the new skills that we're going to talk about from semi-finals. Some things went well, some things didn't go so well, but I know I need to work on from there, so that's why it's great. I'd probably be not so good or shit if I didn't know what I was doing and I was frustrated and didn't know where to go next.
Are you open to sharing what went well and what didn't go well?
Yeah. So I started the session today. So I'm going to do a full simulation this weekend for tests 1 through 7.
Mm-hmm.
So the last 3 days of training, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, have been pretty relaxed, pretty chilled out compared to my normal training. Today's one was basically just to touch up on some of the skills that I might not have had much exposure to. So things like the pirouettes and what that might look like. Because at the time of us recording this right now, we haven't got much detail on the workout. So just know that it's 3 handstand walk pirouettes, and then I did some ruck practice with the muscle ups. So this is the second time I've used the ruck. Firstly, I'm not sure what the ruck will be. I know Go Ruck have a brand new style of plate carrier, which is very different to the backpack that I got from the 2019 games. So I know that, I guess, technology has developed a lot. And I'm hoping it will be a little bit easier because right now the plate that I have in my backpack is flying all over the place. Some successful sets, some really unsuccessful sets. But that's where the frustration was. The pirouette stuff went really well. Practiced different types. So I practice walking into where we have a 1x1 meter box. I assume it's going to be a 4x4 foot box, which is what the age group quarterfinals, semifinals had. So I practiced walking in, doing 3 turns and walking out. And then I practiced walking in, doing 1 turn, walking forward, do another turn, walking forward, do another turn, and then walking out of that. So that all went well. The muscle up stuff didn't go so well today, although that actually went well a few days ago. So a few things I need to look at. I film all my workouts anyway and film all my movements from different angles so I can compare and just see what went wrong. I think I know what went wrong versus today versus 4 days ago. Yeah.
So where we're at right now, we are 2.5 weeks out from semi-finals. But by the time this podcast comes out, it's going to be 1.5 weeks before semi-finals. So just on what you were talking about there, which is there's a lot of these movement standards that right now are kind of open to interpretation.
Yeah.
All we've really seen is an Instagram post announcing what the workouts are. And then on the CrossFit Games website, there is kind of like the open quarterfinals, semifinals, a bit of a indication as to what the workouts are, but there's no more details than what we've seen on Instagram.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's good? Do you like that? Or would you prefer to see all the event details released right from the start?
I think when you compare it, when you're looking at the leaderboard as, at the end of semi-finals, you'll of course have week 1 results that are probably getting beaten by people in week 3. And that's just the nature of it. You learn by watching other people do. So I don't think anyone's at a necessary disadvantage because, Africa competes against Africa, Northwest competes against North. It's all relative to the space that you're in. So, the week 2 guys get exactly the same amount of time as everyone else that they're competing against directly for those particular spots. Yes, if you want to come at number 1 in the worldwide leaderboard of semifinals, then week 3, of course, is going to have an advantage because you can really fine tune after watching everyone else go ahead. So I quite like the unknown side of it. I like that they've released it a week out, and that gives people the chance to throw about different suggestions. I watched a podcast with Pat Vellner, the Morning Chalk Up guys, talking elite fitness, and Brian Friend, and they talk about they go through the workouts with Pat, and he gives his thoughts on each of them, and very similar to mine. There's nothing that he said that I also didn't think as well. But it's funny to listen from an athlete's point of view versus a commentator's point of view versus an analyst's point of view.
What were some of the main things that Pat was saying that you were agreeing with? I haven't listened to that one yet.
Yeah, so the things that the things that Pat said was much more for him because I know he's on the PFC ASFA, whatever it's called, which is like the athletes representative board. So he's basically the voice for athletes, right? Him and Brent Fikowski and a few others. So he was like addressing some of the safety issues that, he's talking about the ruck, and if the ruck doesn't have a strap across the tummy, it makes it much harder to do anything like a kipping movement, but it's also dangerous because the way the plate moves and that sort of stuff. Things I thought about that sort of thing. Brian Friend touched on things like it's now unfair that the games athletes last year got briefed on the L-sit legless rope climb and no one else has in the season, and that's what they think the rope climb is going to be in semifinals, although it didn't state an L-sit, something like that. There's frustrations at things like repetitive running, and is it going to be a shuttle run versus an assault runner, or is it going to be like a stadium run around the arena? There is frustration on a double echo bike from them, the use of it twice. What else was there? Things like using the wall-facing handstand push-up. Just people kind of talk about it being maybe a bit of a waste of time. If it's just a regular wall-facing one, should they then bring back the old standard from the echo press, where you make them go to an imaginary line as such, but then
as then they think it's too easy, it's not going to have a significant impact on the workout.
Yeah, but then I think Pat rebutted that and just said a lot of people will get caught out with it.
Yeah, I think it has
which
a pretty significant role.
Yeah. What else? I guess from Pat's side, he was just talking about more of the unknowns of it all, and there's no real complaints from him. And the other guys are just kind of playing devil's advocate, I guess, and moaning a little bit about it. But going back to your first question, I don't think there's any right or wrong if they release it now or release it later. At the end of the day, you're competing against your semifinals, and that's all that matters anyway, if you're trying to get to the next stage of the CrossFit Games.
Yeah, I think something that I think we can all agree on, well, I hope we agree on, is that regardless of the format of the workouts or what's actually tested, the best of the best always qualify.
Yeah.
So when we have these kind of conversations about thoughts on the workouts, formats, what could be better, what could be worse, I think we're also thinking about like the overall populace of people who are competing at semifinals. And when we say the best of the best is going to make it anyway, we're really talking about like the top 1 to 2% of semifinal athletes who are actually going to be qualifying to the next stage.
Yeah.
I do think that, whilst I totally agree, it doesn't really have any bearing on the overarching results of the semifinals, because like you said, Africa's only competing against Africa, Asia's only competing against Asia. But I do think when you do know the details of the tests before you go and do the event, the preparation is very different. And I think for the athletes who are competing in week one, there's just, because of all the unknowns as to, are we going to see an assault runner or a shuttle run in that event? What's the rope climb standing going to be? What are the pirouettes going to look like? Those athletes are having to deal with a little bit more stress, and it makes their preparation a little bit harder. Versus the athletes who are competing in the last week, who have the chance to now know all the standards, and are able to practice the workouts in their entirety. So the CrossFit Open is fair for everyone, because everyone's finding out exactly the same time. Everyone has to deal with the preparation the exact same way, and everyone has to compete on the same weekend. And so part of me thinks that I understand from probably a spectator and also logistics side of things, they have to spread semifinals over multiple weeks. They can't be shipping equipment all over the world or create enough equipment to look after all these semifinal athletes on the same weekend. So that makes sense. Also in terms of spectatorship, if you have all the competitions happen in one weekend, that's a lot of hype, and then it's just done. Kind of drag out the excitement over multiple weeks, make sure everyone gets eyes on them. That makes a lot of sense. But I do think that giving the week one athletes perhaps an extra week so that they can prepare to the best of their ability, and maybe releasing the standards so that it's fair for them, I think I would like to see that, I think.
Yeah.
And also knowing, because I we have two people representing the process programming as a part of Africa. And, a lot of coaches will typically use that last weekend before the competition, not for a full run through. Because you're quite close to competition, then you'll normally do like a 50 to 75% run through, maybe do some events in their entirety, and other events you kind of just do touches on, because you're actually quite close to competition, especially a lot of athletes are having to travel for this competition, right? Which means they're losing a few days to travel, which means their body's going to be a bit compromised anyway. But for the week one athletes, because they only found out the workouts on the Friday, the week before the competition, that means the week where you typically taper, that's their only chance to actually simulate all the workouts.
Yeah.
And again, with so many unknowns, I just think that I'd like to see maybe give those athletes an extra week.
Yeah, I think actually when you just talk about that, that's one of the things that they spoke about in that podcast, was that some of the workouts just got almost too many new pieces in it. And that can just throw people off, not only athletes, but also like judges. You know, these judges who are going to be going to these semi-finals probably have never judged any of these sorts of movements before. They're not a thruster, they're not a pull-up. It's a brand spanking new thing to think about and have to judge. So, you know, will we see an issue there as well? And most likely, yes, somewhere, and probably again in week one. So that's probably a disadvantage, I guess, for the week one people, because I'm sure CrossFit and the organizers will learn from some errors that might pop up in week one that they just didn't forecast. So yeah, that's probably another disadvantage, I guess, to week one guys.
So let me ask you, like, how do you feel about all the new movements? And let's talk about what the new movements are this year.
Yeah.
For people who haven't actually studied all the workouts, we've got a hand over hand sled pull, which we've seen at the CrossFit Games.
Yeah.
Obviously that's always a tough one. We've done.
I'm not sure. Again, like, so we standard. I'm not sure if it's actually a hand over hand sled pull. Like, so again, this is something that Velna spoke about. Is like, you know, when they got briefed for their sled pull, it was feet don't move in a box. But it, like you say,
for which competition?
So I think it was in the games. It was a games event, and there's one at Rogue as well. And the standards are basically like your feet don't move once you start pulling it.
Yeah.
And a lot of actually, I remember what they said was a lot of these new movements, they hadn't figured out figured out a punishment for the people who broke the rules. For example, let's say like Noah Olsen, when he did the double bang or whatever it was called, where he hooked the sled, like
pushing it.
Yeah, exactly. Like there was no repercussions for it. It's just like, hey, don't do that.
Yeah.
And like, so Velna was using an example. He's like, well, what if I get to the sled and the guy next to me is stepping back and he's moving it faster than me? I'm just going to start stepping back, because you're not going to punish him. Like, you don't have, like, you have to run over there and do 5 burpees.
Or a time penalty.
Exactly. So then he says, like, what do you do? And the judges just go, don't do that. Yeah. So it's like, you know, you can ride that line.
Because the rep is only credited when the sled actually.
Yeah, it's like, do you just do one of those and risk getting told off? Or like, if you do that, they're going to make you go back and push the sled back and then come back and start pulling again. So there has to be, if for any of these new movements there, if it's something like that where there's a gray area, there has to be like a punishment, maybe like a tangible punishment. We have to do something, right?
Yeah, and I think the solution is you just can't have gray areas.
Yeah.
Like with these movement standards, you know, get creative with movements, and I love that. I love the variety personally. I'm going to ask you about this in a second, but there has to be black or white standards. Yeah. And I think, you know, last year at the CrossFit Games, that was probably one of the big criticisms of things like the wall-facing handstand push-up, which was like the head passes below a line, doesn't have to touch anything. That was a bit of a grey standard. Yeah. That was like up to the judge's discretion. Okay, yes, I hadn't thought about that in terms of movement standards, but it'll be interesting to see. After week one, we're all going to know. Although we probably aren't going to know, because they have said that 30% of the events are not actually going to be televised. Yeah. So,
which is ridiculous.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a shame for the athletes. And I just want to reiterate, this podcast is not about just bashing the games. Like, it's amazing. We're so excited for all of it. We're just kind of putting everything under a microscope and just sharing our thoughts on it. But that is a bit of a shame. I know, even for the athletes that, you know, we have competing there.
You will be okay, because Africa will be televised.
Well, Africa is, yeah.
Because all of the ones that the games own, which are the American ones, and they're doing the Oceania television stuff, and the European ones, they won't do Linda. You won't see Linda online.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, what I was saying is that Africa, they got the short end of the straw last year, where they didn't have anything televised. It was an Instagram live, Yeah. Okay, anyway, let's go back to the new movements. Yeah. So we'll go to workout 2, new movements. We're seeing a ring complex the very first time. Yeah. Not surprised. We'd actually done a bit of prep for this. Yeah. Thinking it might come up. But we have to do your ring complexes with a weighted backpack. Yeah. So that's a new movement. We go into the next workout. We have dumbbell bench presses. Yeah. That's going to be a new movement that we haven't seen. We've seen
Ruck pistols are also a new thing.
Ruck pistols.
Burpees,
true.
Yeah.
So we've got Linda, a repeat of a workout that you have done
Mm-hmm.
at the semi-finals, but this time you're going to be pressing 2 dumbbells.
Yeah.
That's going to be an interesting one. I can definitely think in my head straight away about some potential grey areas there,
Yeah.
specifically around what is going to be the bottom standard of the dumbbell bench press.
Starting position,
Is it does it touch the chest? Does it touch the shoulder? What does lockout have to look like, etc. Like hips allowed to leave the bench. That was always a bit of a grey one last time with the hips and the heels leaving, so that would be interesting. We move into workout 4. So far we had a new movement in every workout. We don't have one in workout 4. We have the assault runner into snatch.
Well, you don't know if it's assault runner.
Actually, I've just looked here and it says assault air runner.
Is it
on the official games website?
Okay.
Yeah. So I know you'd mentioned this morning it could be a shuttle run, and I know on Instagram it just said run.
Yeah.
But now it actually says assault runner.
Okay, cool.
Okay, there you go. And then we go to event 6. We have handstand walk pirouettes.
Yeah.
And rumor has it this is going to be a walk and then a pirouette and then a walk and then a pirouette and then a walk and a pirouette. But we don't know if you have to turn the same way. Can fingers touch the line? How far is that walk? Blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera. We've got seated legless rope climbs. Rumors being that there has to be a controlled legless descent, which I know was supposed to be about a part of that alpaca workout at the CrossFit Games, which got rained off. So that was an element that I know Bosman wanted to test.
That was also supposed to be an LSIT as well.
And was that supposed to be an LSIT as well?
Yeah, so Vellner was basically trying to describe the standard that they got told. And he said, athletes must make an effort to maintain an L. And people were like, well, what if the L isn't maintained? It's like, well, just make an effort. Again, like, just do it. Don't be lazy. Basically, is the answer. And the other thing they said was that the rope had to be on the outside of your legs. It couldn't be on the inside of your legs. They said, well, what if it falls into the inside of your legs? They said, well, get it out your legs.
Yeah. See, then the standard would have to be, if it falls between your legs, you must come back down to the start and restart it. That would be brutal, but that's the only way you could make it black and white versus...
Yeah.
You've got seated legless rope climbs, nothing else new in that workout. And then we didn't really have anything new in the last workout. So what are your thoughts on seeing all these new elements? Do you like it? Do you not? I know there are a lot of CrossFit Games athletes, like veterans, who are quite vocal about not liking all this variety that's coming into the competitions. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I quite like it. I don't think it's unexpected after seeing quite a few new movements already thrown out in this season and seasons previous already at all 4 levels, of games, semis, quarters, and open. So new things are coming out all the time. And yes, I think some are a bit more experimental and maybe not so well thought out. Like maybe the crossover, like the single crossover, I think. And, I just think that sometimes, like in test 6, maybe it's just a little bit too much new stuff in one thing, in one workout for athletes, judges, and organizers to get together. We might nail it and knock it out of the park and be totally fine, and what I just said is completely irrelevant. But yeah, I do think when you bring in so many new moving parts to it, it can get quite confusing. But I like the introduction of new movements. I like that it forces athletes to continue to work on new skills and develop something that, let's be honest, everyone at the elite level can handstand walk probably 200 feet unbroken nowadays. So adding some sort of complexity in there is almost necessary now to make it a new challenge and to make it a bit more fun to watch. I just hope, like you said, it's not just go and twirl on a spot and then you're done. Maybe there's actually more complexity to it. You have to walk in and out of another box or something. So, I guess just like anything, when they bring it in for the first time, people generally don't like change. But then over time, once you've practiced it, people are like, oh, this is actually totally fine. And it's just now a part of the sport. And then people forget it was ever even a new movement. How many times have you seen people posting about crossover double unders or single crossovers now? When it first got released before the quarters, everyone was moaning about it. And now it's just a part of the sport.
And I think people were actually loving it, like becoming a novice at something again.
They just didn't like being shown up in the testing.
Well, that's what I want to say is that, the consistency on the people who are often complaining about the tests are often the people who are not excelling at the tests.
Yeah.
But I do think, going back to your comment about, the excessive variety, especially in one workout, I think the variety is fine as long as there aren't those gray areas. Yeah. Because I think people in CrossFit, like, when you have a clear definitive start and a finish position, it's not hard to judge a movement. sometimes, most of the time, bring in anyone off the street, explain what the start and finish looks like, and they'll be able to do a decent job of it. Now, there's some movements like an air squat where there isn't, like, you're not having to touch anything. There's no like tangible feedback on when it starts and finishes. I can understand why that's a bit harder. So I guess, again, coming back to that first point, it would just be interesting to see what the standards are and how clear they are, and what the punishments are if someone does not meet the standards. My take on the new movements is I think it's really good. Yeah, I think it goes back to the essence of, I think, early days of CrossFit, which was, and in the CrossFit Games, of this whole idea of virtuosity, right? And exploration of movement, and that, okay, a handstand push-up is a great movement, but there are so many forms of handstand push-ups that can be explored, and we need to be exploring all of them. And I think what kind of happened with the sport is that it almost got too predictable. And what I mean by that is, like, the predictability is not a bad thing in terms of the standardization of tests. Like, you always kind of knew for many years that you're going to see a thrust, you're going to see a chest to bar, you see a muscle up, you'll see a double under, you see a wall ball in the CrossFit Open. But I guess the predictability of that was that you always knew who was going to win. Yeah. And again, this isn't, maybe I'm saying this and I feel this way because no offense, you're a fantastic athlete, but I don't coach someone who's a perennial CrossFit Games athlete who's always going to win. In which case, if I did, maybe then I wouldn't have this argument. But it just opens things up a lot more. So it's like, when I think about you and the semifinals, and I know your skill set, and I know these tests now, when I think about the field of competitors who you're going up against, there's so many elements here that you just actually have no idea how they're going to do. Yeah. Something like the semi-final tests where the elements are a GHD, a barbell, a rope, handstand push-ups. You generally know who's going to be finishing top and progressing to next round. Now you have no idea. You can have some very, very capable athletes who just can't do a pirouette, and on that workout can't move through the first 50% of the workout. Yeah. Or you may have someone who can't do a legless rope climb from a seated position. Yeah. So lots of elements here that's going to make it exciting. And as I said, the best athletes I think are still going to get there. So I still think my argument is valid. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I'm all for the new movements. And I agree. I think as long as the movement standards are clear, concise, and everyone can understand them easily, then, and especially the judges understand them, then I'm all for it. I keep introducing new movements. I do like the way that Boz seems to do it, which is introduce at games level and trickle down. Maybe like a slightly dumbed down version or easier version, like the double crossover is now just a single crossover in the quarterfinals. I like that way, and it's just like if you don't practice it when you see it, like, it's your fault. It's like, it's not like there hasn't been clues that this stuff was going to show. You listen to a podcast and Boz is on it, and he literally says straight up, like, I want to test this. And every social media feed out there, posts about it, and then people still don't practice it. Yeah. People just stick with a regular rope climb versus trying to an L-sit, ascent and descent. Yeah. So I think it's great. I like it. It keeps people coming back to the sport, and keeps new people coming through the door versus just bashing out thrusters and pull-ups all the time.
Yeah. And I think as a programmer and a coach, it's been really fun. Yeah. And it's forced me to have to go back to learning how to teach some of these movements, and what would be some progressions to get someone to go from handstand walking to learning a pirouette. Yeah. And variety, I think, especially at the elite level, our elite program, we're working with high level athletes, your level, or people who are trying to get to, semifinals and beyond, and just having more elements to play with in a program, allows you to still keep the structure, but also just keep variety in there. People doing CrossFit at the elite level for 10, 15 years kind of get to a point where they've done enough, not enough thrusters or enough handstand push-ups, but just giving a new element that's going to challenge complexity, and again, make them a novice again. I think it's great. For sure. I really enjoyed this season. And this is, I think, one of the amazing things about YouTube, the internet, and podcasts, like trying to get inside the brain of Boz. When we started this run into the semi-finals, and we've got 2 teams competing in Asia. We got another athlete who's competing in a team, but we're not coaching her team. We've got 3 individuals qualify. We've got Lee Coach who's qualified to the CrossFit Games already. This is an amazing year for us so far. And as soon as the Open finished, I listened to almost every podcast I could find with Boz on it. And I listened to a lot of the podcasts with him and Pat Sherwood, which is called Varied Not Random.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of podcasts where he kind of dissects across at games, shares his thoughts on why he did it, and just shares a lot of thoughts and ideas about programming in general. And I've actually gained a lot more admiration and respect for Boz, because hearing him actually talk about how he programs and why he programs that way, there is a lot more method behind the madness. A lot of people just see a CrossFit Games test, and honestly, a lot of people think, oh, it must be nice to have all year to just think about creating cool, exciting tests, but it's not. There's so much more that goes into it. And so it's been fun listening to his ideas and then trying to think and predict what might come up in the semifinals. And I think we actually did a pretty good job in terms of looking at these tests now and seeing the elements that we exposed you guys to. We did a lot of pirouettes. We did a shitload of crossover double unders. I'm actually a little bit gutted those didn't show up. What else? The legless rope climbs from seated.
We did weight vest muscle ups.
We did weight vest muscle ups. What else did we do?
Wall facing handstand push-ups.
A lot of wall facing handstand push-up variations. Anyhow. Okay, what are your thoughts on looking at the overall testing body? Every time we've done a podcast, we've done a podcast in the Open, we did a podcast on the quarterfinals, now we're talking about the semifinals. Something that we have talked about a lot, and you have shared your thoughts on this as well, is the fact that we can't assess the validity of a test until we look at the overall season. Do you still believe in that? So I guess what I'm asking there is, these semifinals, can we look at this as a set of 7 tests, or do we need to think about everything that has preceded it as well? So the Open, the quarterfinals.
I think when you have maybe 7 tests, it's you got more of an argument that you can say that that's probably a broader, better range of tests to test fitness. I don't think you can when it's 3 tests in the Open, or I have 4 tests in the Open because they had the thruster in there. But yeah, I think when there's 7 tests, maybe there's more validity to say that this can be a solid set of tests and standalone tests. I still think, though, if you're talking about what the test was this year, you got to look at the entire season from the Open all the way to the games to see what the eventual winner or podium finishes had to go through. And then you'll see there was no sprint workout ever. There was no max lift there. Or this movement never came up, which it should have come up or has always been tested. Or there were so many new movements and, whatever it might be. So I think, you got 2 or 3 different ways to look at it. You can look at it as wherever the athlete got to in the season, then you use that set of tests. You could use the 5 different stages as a whole testing body, or you can just use, I'd say the semifinals is a decent one. I think the quarterfinals only 5 tests, probably not enough. I'd say 7 tests is probably good enough now, although I guess tests 4 and 5 are similar. Yeah.
I think it is a tough one because I think there's one argument you could make, which is, okay, let's take the semi-final test, for example. We've tested athletes' abilities to do shuttle runs already. So therefore, do we need to test it again? We've already tested an athlete's ability to do a heavy thruster. Therefore, do we need to test them again? But at the same time, whilst that is a valid argument, this set of tests at semi-finals ultimately decide who moves to the next level. And that's what this is all about when it comes to the sport, right? It's getting the best athletes to the CrossFit Games. So both are important, right? You want to look at all the tests. When you get to CrossFit Games, you need to look back at the semi-finals, quarterfinals, and the Open. And I guess as a programmer, ask, have we tested everything? A balanced test of everything, but also look within each set of tests, so the Open, the quarters, and the semis, and then ask that same question: was this set of tests also a balanced set of tests? So to answer the first piece, I think we've seen a lot of different elements now. Something we're seeing as we get further on in the season is increases in complexity. We always know that exercise selection is going to change because you're going to have the ability to throw in more elements like sandbags, potentially kettlebells, blah, 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 blah. But we're seeing the complexity of things level up as well. So when you look at just the tests of the semi-finals, we've got 7 tests. What are your thoughts in terms of, do you think this is a balanced set of tests? And is this testing the fittest athlete? Is this going to find us the fittest athletes to qualify to CrossFit Games?
So I guess when I look at a set of tests, there's probably I guess some criteria that you got to go through. So you're probably going to look at, firstly, are they testing max strength? They are in a situation, I guess, where you can talk about the max snatch after the run. So there's some form of heavy maximal test. They tick that box. Is there a long aerobic one? Yeah, there is, but it's not a pure aerobic test because there's firstly a lot of unknown with the sled pull and what it is and how it moves on there. So that might be a huge bottleneck, which actually takes away from it being a longer aerobic test. But if it moves well, then that's a long aerobic test done. Is there like, let's call it quote unquote CrossFit, where you go monostructural gymnastics and weightlifting in a workout, and they've done that in like a moderate time domain in test 6, I think it is. And then is there a sprint workout as well, which is like high power output? That's probably the only one maybe they haven't tested, because 6 minutes, a 6 minute time cap isn't really a sprint. It's not like you drop the hammer on the Echo bike and that is like, you're going to set yourself on fire, because there's still quite a lot of element of pacing in that workout for the final test. So
I also do think
sprint is
that, I also do think, sorry to interrupt, that last one is like the chunks are too small in the 3 rounds format, that it doesn't give you enough of a chance to really make it hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for example, if it was so the workout is 3 rounds of time, 15/10 echo bike calorie, 20 toes to bar, 60 foot sandbag carry.
Yeah.
If it was instead, let's say a 40 cal echo bike, 50 toes to bar, and then 120 or a 200 foot sandbag carry.
Yeah.
That would be exciting.
Yeah.
And it would be, the volume is still more or less the same, but the density of it would mean you kind of take out the pacing element, and you're going to see athletes like really
go for it,
make a decision as to how much they want to make it hurt.
Yeah, for sure. I still think it's a good enough workout that it makes you make a decision anyway. If you're like on the border of qualifying or not.
The bike is going to be the separator, right? How much do you want to make that bike hurt?
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the transitions as well, but the bike and transitions, I'd say I would assume all top athletes is going broken on the toes to bar and the sandbag carry. It's got to be a given. If you break it, you can still do well, but you're not going to win it. So yeah, I think it's a fast enough workout to be exciting and to kind of, I guess, tick that box a little bit, but it's not a pure sprint workout. I guess that's the only probably the test that they're missing, because even the 8 snatches into 800-meter run is still not a pure sprint. It's still fast, but
it's not a sprint. No.
Yeah, like people will be going touch and go through the 8 snatches and then straight into the runner, but it's not a flat out sprint.
I think something that we've seen now across all the different levels is the fatigue-based strength test.
Yeah.
So in the CrossFit Open, we saw the thruster after the burpees and the runs. In the quarterfinals, I can remember Masters, that was a clean after the handstand push-up GHD box jump. In the individual quarterfinals, you had the clean and jerks descending rep scheme, but it was like a fatigue-based test. There was a breathing element to it as well.
Yeah.
And I know that it's something that Boz feels is important. Like, you can't just reward the really strong athlete. You've got to be fit as well as strong. So I wonder if this is going to be a theme that we're going to see more of in next season. And in that same breath, which of these elements that we have now seen, these new movements in the quarterfinals and the semifinals, do you think are going to be potentially creeping into the CrossFit Open test next year? So it's like, just general athletes who love doing the CrossFit Open, like what are we going to learn from this, and what do we need to start including in our training?
Yeah, obviously going away from the semifinals, I think things like complexity with a skipping rope will come in. So some sort of crossover or double crossover.
Speed steps, backwards skipping.
Yeah, maybe I hope not backwards skipping.
Yeah, really can't do
quite
too
hard. Yeah, I think skipping complexity will come in. I wouldn't mind handstand complexity coming in, but I still do think it's too much of a bottleneck for people. People just aren't good enough to be doing strict handstand push-ups in the open yet. And it kind of takes away the fun if you're looking at it from an affiliate's point of view. If you're an elite's point of view, it doesn't make a difference, to be honest. But from an affiliate's point of view and the community's point of view, it's not great. I know a lot of people moaned about the age group quarterfinals having wall facing as the very first movement, and they're like, well, that's shit, can't do it. What a waste of time, what a waste of money. And that really bummed quite a few people out, but I always say at the end of the day, like, the tests are there to find the fittest on earth. Like, you can't be upset if you couldn't do it. It's just another hole in your armory, which you got to go and fix in the future. So I do think there'll be complexity with inverted work as well, because kipping and strict handstand push-ups they're too much of a staple now. People are too good at them. So I think there will be complexity with maybe more like handstand walking, handstand holding, pirouettes.
Strict pull-ups. I think we'll see strict pull-ups in the CrossFit Open.
Strict pull-ups.
I think it's a hard movement standard. They're going to have to find a way to, again, make it black or white and not grey.
Yeah.
But I do know that Boz loves testing like gymnastics capacity in its purest sense. I think complexes like the ring, the toes to ring, muscle up, dip.
Yeah.
Could see variations of that on a bar as well.
Yeah, I think we'll see gymnastic complexes.
Yeah.
As well as maybe a barbell complex as well, where it like just forces people to, like you said, have like some sort of virtuosity on the barbell versus just cycling a hang power clean. You got to be able to do a clean, a front squat, a hang squat clean, and then a thruster. I don't know. Yeah. You know, whatever it might be. So I think that will creep in as well. What else?
I do think that running is going to be a mainstay now. Yeah. I know that Bosman really thinks that running is something that should be tested at all levels. And
I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree as well. It's a very pure expression of aerobic capacity. And I think we're going to see that in all the stages. The only way you're going to really see that at the Open is probably going to be a shuttle run.
Yeah.
Same in the quarterfinals, but then, you know, when you get into things like semifinals and CrossFit Games, I'm sure you're going to see lots of different variations of running. Yeah. And I would love to see other variations of running at the semifinals, but I know that with CrossFit taking over all of the programming, that makes it hard, because I guess if it's not a shuttle run and it's not an assault runner, that means running outside or around a stadium. And when you're competing in loads of different stadiums, it's going to be very hard to be consistent there.
Yeah, well, yeah, especially because CrossFit only own the rights to the programming, not the actual rights to the other competitions like the Far East Throwdown and the Torian Pro and that sort of stuff.
So what are your thoughts on CrossFit taking control of all the programming again, like the old regionals days?
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I think it's good.
Me too.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I think it makes a more valid set of tests, and it validates the athletes who go through to the next level. You can't point your finger about, oh, these guys got to swim and these guys got to do this, and I didn't get to do that, where I would have been really good at that. So I like the fact that they've standardized it across the board. I like that they tried to do it last year, but it didn't really work because the event organizers could pick and choose whenever they wanted to put them into their own programming, which certainly made it easier or harder for some people with the heavy complex and the legless rope climb shuttle. I am still disappointed, and it's, I guess, not a go at CrossFit, because I know, of course, like it's any business, it's got to be profitable. You can't just be leaking money all the time. But I'm definitely disappointed that they only choose to take on the rights for the American European semifinals. Like it's still, of course, it's great that Asia, Africa, South America, and Oceania have the ability to run these semifinals. But if you want to grow the sport, like, you have to invest more into these other places. Like, there are so many affiliates in Asia. There are so many affiliates in Africa and in like South America and Oceania. Like, these guys are missing out as well. And people always moan about, oh, there's not good enough athletes coming here, we shouldn't give them spots. Like, there's never going to be better athletes unless you give them the chance and give them the exposure and give them the time and money and space to be able to do that sort of stuff, right? So yeah, I think that's a bit disappointing. I think it's a bit disappointing that they're not going to be televising Linda. Or I don't know if there's any other ones that they're not going to be doing. But I think it's a strange decision. I'd like to know why. Like, how much more does it cost to just leave that live stream on versus turning it off? Yeah, people maybe need a lunch break. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be, but
yeah, I'm sure we'll find out reasons why in the aftermath of it. I do think that, going back to the question of having the same test across all of them, I think that's a really good thing. Yeah, I think from a spectator's point of view as well, you know, knowing what to expect every week, and then knowing what the benchmark is and what the time to beat is, just makes it even more exciting. For sure. And, you know,
that was always cool to see, like, across regions in the past.
Someone setting a new world record on an event or a new biggest lift, and it didn't get boring. You know, and I think that's I think the age-old debate in CrossFit is that we've become so addicted to variety and variance that we now don't want standardization and consistency. But I think that has to be an important part of the sport as well, and it's what every other sport does. We talked about this a lot on other podcasts.
For sure.
Okay. Well, how do you feel about these tests for yourself? Okay, well, can I even ask you? I meant to ask you this at the start. What are your goals for the semi-finals?
My goals for semi-final would be to qualify for CrossFit Games. Take one of the top 2 spots in Asia. It always has been. It always will be. I will never go to participate and be another number. Sometimes the tests work out in my favor. Sometimes my performances are great. Sometimes they're dog shit. It's just the nature of being an athlete, I guess. But no, I like these tests. I think they're fun. Firstly, I think I'm excited to try them this weekend in their entirety. I think they're a decent bunch of tests as well.
What does that mean?
As in, like what we spoke about, like it's a decent set of tests. It tests
it's balanced. You mean?
Yeah, it's a fairly balanced set of tests. There isn't too much repeated from the last 2 stages of the season already, so the Open and the quarters. So there's still new stuff coming in, which is cool. And it's a chance for me to compete in front of people again, and I don't really get that chance too often anymore. Like life's pretty much returned back to normal now here in Hong Kong, and I'm excited to be able to get out and travel fairly freely. I mean, last year it was a complete ball ache to try and get to Busan in Korea, but this year it seems to be a lot more pain-free, and it should be. I'm looking forward to it. I am really looking forward to it. My body feels good. My mind is in the right place. I'm looking forward to it.
I actually completely forgot to ask, but what are your thoughts? 5 out of 7 workouts have machines in them.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk about that.
Yeah.
And we also have an echo bike in 2 workouts, and we have an assault runner in 2 workouts.
Yeah.
Actually, an assault runner in 3 workouts, technically.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Good.
Because you like him?
Because I don't want to fucking touch a barbell, that's why.
Yeah.
Unless it's a deadlift or a barbell bench press. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I think maybe there's probably too much. I think there's if they're in 5 of the 7 tests, maybe a little bit of overkill, and there could definitely be a bit more variety in there. Yeah, I think it's an easy way to test endurance in its purest form, I guess. And when you look at the CrossFit Games, like that's what you do. Like that's what you're looking for the athletes to be able to do. Like I still think CrossFit is an endurance sport. It absolutely is. I mean, especially when you get to the games and you're doing anywhere between 10 to 15 events over a weekend. So yeah, I mean, you got to be good at it anyway.
Yeah,
it'd be the same as if like, you know, everyone moaned when there was dumbbells and all those workouts that one year at regional. It's the same. Like you just got to be good at everything nowadays. And if that means a shitload of meters and calories and time spent on machines, then so be it. Of course, it might lend its hand to some different athletes, and you know, people will be looking and be like, oh well, that athlete couldn't do any of the skills, but they could rip the runner and the rower, and the assault bike or echo bike, and that's just unfair now. It's just like, well, that's the testing body, that's the athlete is going to go through. They're probably still a decent athlete. They're probably not a complete Gumby if they're at this level anyway. So yeah.
I mean, I think the echo bike, you know, it plays a pretty big role in the last workout, but not it's not the everything. Doesn't define the workout, and the echo bike in workout 1 doesn't play that big a role.
Yeah,
I do think though the assault runner in workout 1 plays a massive role.
Yeah,
it's probably the majority of where the workout's going to be spent, and a big separator in that workout.
Yeah, and
then test 4 and 5, the snatch and runs, the runner plays a massive role there as well. So
depending on what, I saw they released the scoring table actually.
No, that scoring table was only to do with your placing in each event.
Oh, so it's like 1 versus
100 points
okay, right.
to 97 points.
It didn't say what each workout.
No, it didn't say the weighting of the workouts.
Okay, right.
Because I think that's what I think there's going to be a 50-50 point split, which we saw in the semi-finals for the age group masters. Okay, which is your favorite test? What are you looking forward to the most, and why?
Probably test 1 or 3, Linda or the hand over hand sled pull one.
So 2 quite different workouts.
Yeah.
Why?
I think I'll be good at them comparatively to my competitors. Yeah, I think I probably excel more at aerobic work and machines, and I've had plenty of exposure to something like a sled. So it's nothing new for me there, although it's a new movement. It's nothing new. I'm very comfortable with those things, with those 4 different movements. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that's one of those workouts where I look at it and think like I can just get in my flow state and just go for it and see what happens. I don't think there's going to be much that bottlenecks me unless I completely end myself on the runner and then can no longer pull the sled, which I don't think is going to happen. Linda, yeah, I mean, if there's if it's a way to get 2 barbells out of my semi-finals performance by doing a light squat clean and a heavyish deadlift, then perfect. That's good enough for me. So yeah, I think the squat, I mean, I've done this workout. We did it in preparation, actually, the regular one with the 185 bench. No, it was a 190 bench, I think.
205 bench.
No, it wasn't 93.
No?
It was 88 kg.
88.
Yeah. 195, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I did that, and that went really well. I think I believe it's the same time cap from that regionals one. Yeah. 17 minutes, I think.
Sorry, 30 minutes is event 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about event 3 now. So Linda, I think it's a 17-minute time cap, if I'm not mistaken.
17 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, so I did not finish this when I did it at regionals, although I did finish it 3 times in training. I completely blew up after 333. My calves had cramped up like no one. I've never seen them that bad before. So I couldn't keep my heels on the floor when I was doing my bench press, which was crazy. Even like deadlifting, I was actually deadlifting like a ballerina on my tiptoes. It was crazy. So that was like a real disappointment. I remember that. Like that year, I thought I had a decent chance of cracking somewhere near the top 5 in the Pacific. And after day 1, I was deflated and just kind of lost interest afterwards. But yeah, so this dumbbell variation, I think the dumbbells can definitely catch a lot of people out. It's definitely where the workout is made or lost. I believe I can go unbroken on the dumbbells. I need to have a crack at it this weekend. Unfortunately, we only have 85 or 95 pounds, so I'll challenge myself for the 95s. See how that goes. But yeah, it's a workout which again isn't really anything new. I do plenty of dumbbell bench throughout the season. Haven't done it actually probably for the last 3 months, but I'm still good enough at it, I think. So yeah, those 2 are probably my favorite ones. Actually, the last one's not a bad workout. I quite like the last one. I did that. I've actually tested that one already just for a bit of fun. I can definitely make it hurt a little bit more. I think I know for me, my only concern in that workout is what the pull-up bar will be like. I remember last year at Far East Throwdown, my grips completely fucked me at Far East Throwdown. I had 2 sets that tore me in the 2 workouts with high grip, high rep gymnastics. I'm no longer using those grips and I have new ones now. So I'll bring out 3 different types with me to make sure that I am well prepped to be able to do that workout. Like when I did it in here, I only chalked once at the beginning and I was good to go for all 60 toes to bar. Sandbag is not even a part of the workout, I don't think, really. If you can get it, I mean, some people will struggle just to pick it up.
Yeah, I've actually heard quite a lot of athletes saying that that's a hard part of the workout.
Yeah, I think it's obsolete. I think for me, it's just like it's just 15 seconds gone, and you got to get back to the harder part is running back from the sandbag, because I would assume it would be echo bike, toes to bar, move the bag down the floor, turn around, run back, do the next round, run back to the bag, run it back down the floor. Bike, toast bar, and then sprint finish the bag down, drop it, and then finish line. Yeah, but I think that's a good workout. I'm looking forward to those 3. I think in terms of me doing well, that's why I'm excited for them. I'm also excited to test out the pirouettes and L-sit rope climbs, or legless, seated rope climbs. I definitely had a little bit of anxiety about the 40 overhead squats. Definitely not my best movement. But after doing some work on it the other day, I actually feel okay with it. I'm excited to test the workouts, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I like that workout, event 6, because there are so many booby traps in there that it's not just a test of capacity or strength, but like smart strategy, obviously high levels of technique and efficiency in all the movements. And yeah, when I say booby traps, like lots of potentials for bottlenecks.
Yeah.
But that just creates creates more anxiety around that workout, I'm sure, for everyone.
Yeah. You've got a lot of opportunity to slip up or get really bottlenecked quite hard. All of the movements, apart from the row, are movements that if you really push to failure on it, like you ain't coming back for another minute or so, and by that point, your competitors will be blown past you. So yeah, for that, it's like the pirouettes, it's the L-sit, and it's the wall-facing handstand push-up, and then even the first and last movement, the overhead squat.
Say the last set of overhead squats, I think would trip people up quite a lot.
Yeah,
people who are trying to just hold on or push really hard to that point, because 20 is still quite a lot of reps.
Yeah,
on a very shoulder-intensive workout.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I know we're 2.5 weeks out.
Yeah,
we actually have, a fairly jam-packed agenda coming up to semi-finals. What do you do between now and the semis?
Me personally?
Yep.
Or what am I going to try and do, or what's already booked in?
What's it going to look like for the next 2.5 weeks before competition?
So I got a simulation this weekend. I'm going to try and take a bit more time off work next week. I'm going to speak to my personal training clients because, a lot of people out there still think that I'm a full-time athlete, which I'm absolutely not. I work a ton of hours and I got a lot of responsibilities that I need to tick off for my job on a daily basis. So I'm going to try and take a bit more of a backseat. And I know I have a team that will probably step up and help me out there, which I'm grateful for. And my clients, I'm sure, will support me. It's only a once a year sort of thing that I do this. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Of course, I think my recovery game, let's call it, is solid. I'll be getting a bit more body work in as my training has ramping up this weekend. So I've got a session tomorrow with Eleanor Body Shadow, and I'll see her twice again the next week following the simulation. My simulation this week, I assume, will then dictate what my training looks like for the next 2 weeks, a week and a half really. So that will be much of the same. And then, I think one thing to say is that when you are in the final week of it, and I've been in a situation before where you're the last week of regionals or semi-finals, that training can definitely get a little bit monotonous and it can get a little bit boring. So it's important to stay focused, to always have an intention when you walk in versus just like, oh, just do this fucking workout again. I remember when we did the Asia CrossFit Champs and I had to do that fucking Concept 2 workout triathlon, God, like fucking 10 times. And then also doing 333. I remember doing 333 like 6 times. That was brutal doing that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's going to make you better at the workout. It's going to give you more accurate paces. It's going to give you more confidence going into it, assuming that you have the right intention and you hit the right stimulus. And so that's what my training will look like. Hit whatever I need to hit the most, prioritize that. And then I will be flying to Cebu with you and guys from the Process team. We have a few days out there working with one of our affiliates on the Process program, CrossFit Sub-Zero, in Cebu in Philippines, which I'm excited to go to anyway, just to see a nice holiday destination. I'll be doing my own training there whilst also helping athletes. And then we have an athlete camp that weekend. So we're going to be working with 45 athletes from the Philippines, which is awesome. Again, they've all expressed interest in being part of the process and trying to learn from myself, yourself, Alex, and a few of the other boys who are coming down with us. So that's going to be awesome. And then you and I fly back to Hong Kong on the Monday. We then stay in the airport for a couple of hours, and then we fly out to Seoul. We then get a train out of the Seoul airport and down to Busan, and we're basically going to be parked in Busan from Monday until the next Monday. It's going to be busy, but luckily all those flights are pretty short. None are too crazy, none are like red-eye flights or anything like that, so they should be fine. And I think by that point, my preparation will be done anyway. It's all about just taking care of my body and making sure my mind is switched on and in the right place.
Yeah, nice. This is the first time you'll have done something like an athlete camp, where you're actually going to be coaching as well the weekend before. How do you feel about that? Is there any apprehension or?
No, I don't really get anxiety around that sort of stuff. I don't really get anxiety around public speaking or meeting new people. I think if anything, I probably thrive in that situation. I like it. My only concern out of everything is that Cebu is really fucking hot, and like that might affect me a little bit. But also I know my training isn't going to be like, I'm not going to be beating myself up a week before the competition anyway. So I guess that kind of makes me feel a bit better about it. Just got to make sure, because I know when I work like that, because that's considered work for me, right? I often might miss meals, or I might skip out on hydration, or I might screw it, I'll do my session the next day. Like, I can't let that happen this close to competition. If it was 6 months prior, like when we were in Bali, I could definitely let that happen, let it slide a little bit, but not now. So just got to make sure I stay on top of things. But otherwise, I'll still give my all to the athlete camp and to the guys we're working with, which I'm excited to do anyway.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say to any listeners who are going to be there in Korea watching, please come and say hi to us. We have a pretty busy weekend. As I said, I'll be looking after 2 teams and helping them. They'll be competing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then obviously there for Ant for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, so please come say hello, hang out with us. We'd love to meet all you guys as much as you can. And Ant, to you, best of luck.
Thank you.
Semi-finals, looking forward to seeing you crush it. And yes, until next time.
Until next time.